You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Sean Wilkie, and along with my co host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, please go ahead and get us started.
Yeah, I'm Ivan Zach. Really excited to talk today about the topic that is in the area of business. We talk a lot about innovation, but we'll talk about how to innovate your exit strategy and just in general business management. Our guest is Eric Miller. Eric has served over 20 years in the financial industry and co owns a national finance planning company dedicated to serving the needs of healthcare owners. He has personally had over 20,000 conversations with practice owners at every phase of ownership. He has published countless articles, videos, and podcasts on various financial topics and is an expert on matters concerning creating economic independence for practice owners, business, and household. Eric has recently published a book, How to Become a Financial Beast, which quickly became a bestseller on Amazon. That's very much fitting with the veterinary industry. I like the name. It should it should fit with the vet. So, Eric, welcome to the show. Thank you for finding the time. I'm very excited about this conversation.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to talk with you guys today.
So let's dive into it. I'm being continuously pitched on LinkedIn by wealth advisors and a bunch of people that you don't know who they are and what they do. You've been doing it for a long time, and it seems like you know what you're doing. Tell us right off the bat, what is the big difference working with someone like you compared to countless attacks by LinkedIn and everybody else for the veterinarians that are listening?
It's really, really simple. It's that we understand the veterinary industry. You look at anyone that owns a veterinary practice. The reality is that their biggest investment is their business. I mean, it is the main generator of their income. It is the thing that's going to provide them, their retirement. So for me to be a good financial advisor, not only for you and your household, I have to understand something about your biggest investment, which is the practice. So that was just one of the learning points that I had to like really absorb early on as a financial advisor was if I'm going to be any good at what I do, I got to understand about their business. So we just kind of immersed ourselves in learning the business of veterinary medicine.
Okay. Well, then tell us what is, and pretend that no vets are
Mhm.
listening or your clients, and tell us what is the thing that you hear from veterinarians as they engage with you for the first time, and you roll your eyes and you're like, yeah, of course they're thinking it this way. So, what is like the one that you're with your colleagues sitting on the background and giggling about? Okay, there's another vet with the same thing.
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, it's just the unknown of I don't know what to do with my money. I mean, we'll get that question a lot is like I have, hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in my business checking account. I don't know what to do with any of this. We'll get that question quite a bit. And I really think it kind of goes back to most of the people in the veterinary industry, focused on being practitioners. That's what you went to school for. I mean, almost every veterinarian that I've ever met knew they wanted to be a veterinarian when they were like 6 years old. Okay, that was their passion. They never really learned the business side or really understanding how to become like a good owner and an investor. And that's probably the one common theme that we hear more than anything else. And that lack of not really understanding that because they were never trained in that is what, prevents them from really achieving the financial independence I think they deserve.
You very eloquently answered my question without answering like what is the funniest thing that you hear from the vets and you think in your head, well, that's stupid.
It's probably how much they pay themselves
Okay,
and
let's open
why.
that up.
Yeah.
Let's open that up.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like they feel bad for making money. And that's someone coming from our industry is like, really? But I was just talking with a vet today who I met, I've had as a client for, I don't know, 7 years. I met her when she was doing $500,000 of revenue and now she's going to do 4 million this year. And now she's like, I'm starting to make a lot of money, Eric. And actually, I kind of feel bad about it.
Very
And she goes, and I know that's irrational, but I feel bad about it. And I'm like, you're not the only one. I go, a lot of vets have that idea that they don't deserve the money. And I'm like, Do you not remember all the things that happened the last 7 years? You know, all the BS that you had to go through, the dealing with clients and, staff and people quitting and COVID, like, you don't remember that? Like, you deserve it. And I think a lot of them underestimate their value to the business, and they don't compensate themselves for that.
Eric, so question for you. How did you get into financial services specifically for veterinary professionals? How did that whole journey start?
Well, I got my family is into healthcare, was in the healthcare industry. So I saw them getting kind of cookie cutter financial advice. And then when I started to become a financial advisor, and I don't know what people's experience with financial advisors is. It's usually, hey, how much money do you have for me to invest? And I'm going to charge you a percentage for that. And I just didn't really want to do that. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to make a meaningful change in people's lives, which a lot of people say. But then we started to work with physical therapists, and that was the first healthcare group that we worked with. And after that, we found a consulting group that was working with veterinarians. And when we started working with veterinarians, I don't know, I just fell in love with them. I love animals. I love working with people that love animals, and it was just a fit. And that's probably the biggest base of clients that we have right now, are in the veterinary industry. And I think they need the most help from a finance perspective, just because they love being practitioners, but the whole money subject, the finance subject, is just something I think a lot of them would just like to tend to ignore.
So Eric, that's totally me. So as a vet, my main thing, and I know
Hmm.
hundreds of people like that, that my main concern is to push as hard as I can so there's enough money in the bank that I don't have to worry about it, but I don't manage it really well until someone came in and probably started doing that. But essentially, I think there's most vets are on the same page. So if someone listening to us right now is like, "Oh yeah, that's fair. That's what me. I'm doing, 12-hour shifts 7 days in a row, and then I just make sure that I have a couple of hundred grand on my account, and then I just live off that and go on
Hmm.
vacation anytime I want." And then you are hearing that, and you're probably thinking, "Oh my god, this is not right." So, what are the first step for someone that is in that frame of mind? Like, what are the first steps to do to start thinking about the planning?
Yeah, I think the idea is like we have to look like 7 to 10 years in the future. Like, what do you want your life to look like? I mean, do you want your life to look like you're just humping it 12 hours a day and you don't have a break or anything like that? Or do you really want to build a life, financially speaking, where you have multiple income streams, you're free of bad debt, you set up your business so it's profitable, transitionable, and valuable, and really just come up with like what is it that your ideal financial scene looks like in that 7 to 10 year period. And then we can start working backwards to say, okay, these are the systems that we now need to set up to be able to obtain that. And that's generally the first place that I'll start with any owner, because it's very hard to look in the future, especially when you're running a practice, because you're just worried about day to day and what's going to happen next week. And all of a sudden 10 years goes by and you're like, okay, I didn't really have a plan that I should have. And now I'm sitting here still stuck in the business.
So let's take an example. So I
Yeah.
met you for the first time. I'm like, hey, I heard the podcast. I
Yep.
want to plan my life. So in 5 to 7 years, I want to be mortgage free. I want to, the house on average costs $600,000,
Hmm.
maybe where I live here, and then I want to work 3 days a week, and I want to. What other questions do you ask? What else do I need to give you as an input?
And I don't want to have to rely upon going to work every single day to have to pay for my lifestyle. That'd be
Okay.
another question, right? Like you don't want
Okay.
to depend on just the business for the rest of your life as your only income source.
Yeah. So that's
So,
the story is a good start, and then
mhm.
from there, so what are your sort of inputs then that you need to start structuring? What are those sort of, you know, easy if you could name like 4 easy steps for planning, like what would that be going from there?
Just give you one easy step. So the one thing that I'll do with every person that comes across us is this. I have them set up a separate account called we call it a wealth storage account. Okay. And I will have them start to take, wait for it, 10% of their business revenue every single week, okay, gets separated out of the business and goes into a what we call a personal wealth storage account. And the purpose of that account is not for bigger houses or boats or cars or anything like that. It is for future wealth building. And by doing that, I'm able to separate out or start to treat their profits like an expense, and it allows them to really get paid what I think they deserve to get paid for being the owner of the business. You know, most people get paid a salary, a wage, and if you're an executive, maybe you give yourself an additional draw, but very few veterinary owners pay themselves as owners and what that actually means. So that's the first thing that we do. And of course, most people balk at it because they're like, oh, there's no way my business can afford to do that. And I'm like, no, it can't because you're not looking at it as a necessary expense. But that is the one thing that we do that almost every bookkeeper, every practice manager, every other advisor they have looks at that and says, oh my God, you're crazy. Why are you doing that? You're going to bankrupt this place. And I'm like, No, you won't. It's yours. You deserve it. And it's virtuous in the at the end of the day.
I love that. So when you're saying we're converting profit into expense, you mean that, let's say, clinic, semi poorly run at like 12, 13%, or if you're excellent in what you do, you're like 20 plus percent
Hmm.
EBITDA. If you carve out 10% off the top line, then you're essentially taking that profit and putting it aside instead of keeping it in the clinic as everybody else does. And then when they want to buy a next ultrasound or some equipment, they use that capital to finance it instead of going to the bank and getting it and then kind of running it aside from it. So that I love that. So essentially, and is that what you meant by converting profit into expense? You
Yeah,
just
what I'm that very very close. I mean, the way I look at it is this: a business, any practice, it's going to try to spend everything that it makes and then some. It just That's just the way a business works. It's That's the way a country works, you know? So if you understand that concept, then the next thing I'm going to say is going to make a lot of sense too is that a business will also make the exact amount of money it thinks it needs to make to survive. You guys have all had those months where it's like, oh my God, man, if we don't do 10 grand this week, we're not going to make payroll. Right. And then like what ends up happening? Like the necessity is there, it creates the income. That's where income comes from, necessity. So all we're trying to do is put in these things that most veterinarians don't look at as necessities, like profit and reserves and tax money and all these things. And I'm putting them in there as an expense. And what that does is it changes the way that they look at their make break number, their business finances, because I my contention is that most owners are probably underestimating their actual make break number by about 10 to 15%. They're underestimating it, right? And that's why they complain about not having a lot of money. And I heard you guys' podcast on burnout. I have a theory on that as well too, but maybe we do that for another time.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
Eric, I guess the place that I want to go next is, so we've got these basic kind of financial fundamentals put in place. We're building a plan, and all of that seems wonderful. If people want to start, like if they want to, if they're not working with a financial advisor, what would it look like to work with your guys' organization? And how does that start? What does the journey look like?
Yeah, well, the first thing we do is we have a financial assessment that we have everyone take. So, again, when you're dealing with veterinary owners, they're very, I hate to say the word evidence based, but you guys like looking at blood work and you like looking at x-rays and you like looking at all these things because you can't give a healthcare diagnosis if you don't. So, but how many of you actually do that same kind of logic with your personal finances? So, we took it upon ourselves because we're in this industry to actually create a financial assessment where we can show someone, hey, how are you doing in your debt and credit? How are you doing in your estate plan? How are you doing in your tax situation and investment situation? So, we created this assessment where we can show an owner, here's your score, after you take a 100 question assessment, and it's a starting point of like this is where you're at, and from there we can give them direction and guidance on how to improve these different areas.
So is it a questionnaire where it will give you actual result? Is this like a self-driven thing where you can get it from you, 100 questions, you answer them, and does that provide analysis for a conversation, or does it say, you're 40 points out of 100, you suck and you need help? Or is it like, or is it like,
It kinda does that, but we have it set up like a credit score. So I think it's like 800. It's like a 800 is the top score. I don't ask any questions about their like how much you have in the bank or, how much debt that you have. They're kind of general questions, but they are very good to like discover things that you're doing well, things that you're not doing well. After they complete the assessment, we go over the assessment with them and kind of explain this is what this means, this is what this means, and we do that all for free. And if it leads to further conversations, great. But it doesn't require anything but 20 minutes of your time to
so
complete
can
the
we make that
assessment.
available? Is that something that you guys can provide and our
Yeah,
listeners can be
I,
like,
I can send you
access
the
it and do it?
yeah, I can send you the link that we have everyone go to, and you can take the questionnaire right online.
Yeah, we take a small commission off the I'm just kidding. This is a commercial-free podcast, but I think it's good. I think it's for someone to get going. If that's questionnaire that can actually help them, I think that would be very valuable. Now, the other thing is that okay, so this is a general kind of take on this is my ongoing stuff. I do think that this needs to be taken care of, but then there's different transitional phases in life, right?
Mhm.
So now am I thinking, okay, I had this practice for a while, and I'm thinking of selling. Well, when
Yeah.
is a good time to sell? How much I should sell it for? The market was just right now 18, 20x. It plummeted to 11. Should I wait for the market to come back or it never will and the bubble is burst? What is your sort of recommendation, especially in a given financial environment right now, for someone who was thinking, okay, I have 3 to 5 years to think about it,
Mhm.
but I could exit in three, I could exit in five, or maybe I could exit today and do it all over again and one more time and sell another clinic. So
True.
what do you think about the situation now? And then in general, like when should you start thinking when you're getting to that phase of your career?
Yeah, I would start thinking about my transition the day I open my practice, whether that's real for most people or not. But I would start planning like how am I going to transition? Because that you start building the business for who's going to buy it at that point in time. So when it comes to like exiting out your practice, again, it's the biggest financial transaction that most people are going to be faced with in their life. So you do have to give it some thought. And generally speaking, I look at two things: your emotional readiness, like are you ready to leave the practice? I mean, is the game up for you? Is there anything else that you want to accomplish? And do you have a replacement activity in play? Because, as you run a business, I mean, you're going 100 mile an hour and all of a sudden you sell it and now you got nothing to do. And if you don't have a replacement activity, it's just going to mess with you because there's a vacuum of time and, bad things can happen. So I would just make sure you have something that's purposeful for you that is going to replace the activity of ownership. And then from a financial perspective, you got to make sure that you're going to have enough on the sale proceeds in combination with all of your other investments that's going to allow you to live the life that you want to live. And again, all this can be planned out. All of this can, you're going to need a financial team to help you with. But that is certainly one thing that I would do is to really look and say, okay, the sale. It sounds great if I'm going to get $10 million for the sale of my practice, but when you factor in debt and taxes and broker fees and all these other things, I'm not left with that. So, are the proceeds going to be enough for me to live on and live how I want to live and not just barely getting by? So, those would be the two basic questions that I would ask myself. And if they align, then you can start entertaining and looking at transitioning out of the practice, or at least looking at the things that you need to work on to get the business in a condition where it can sell for what you need it to sell for.
Well, I want to go back with a question about the current state of the market. So, someone
Mhm.
who was like, okay, I'll exit 2, 3 years from now, or 3 to 5, maybe call it. But then I'm just, this hype of the market. And I was, toying with talking to, brokers. And all of a sudden, 2023 rolled out, or 2022 and 23. And then, boom, the multiples are not 18 anymore, they're 10.
Mhm.
What would you say to these people that were planning their, exit strategy around that? Are they stuck now for another 10 years? Can they, sell it now for where it is and then kind of do another thing with the proceeds and invest into another practice? Or should they expand the existing one if they can? What would be what is your crystal ball around it? I'm sure
That's
there's
it.
a lot of
That's a lot right there, buddy. But yeah, look, I mean, there's things you can control. I can't control the multiples of what these people are paying. I can't, and but you can control having a business that's going to be attractive in any kind of market environment. So whether or not you're going to get 18 or 12 or 13, if you have a good business that has multiple associates, that has, a high EBITDA, that, has no compliance issues, that, has all the things that someone would want in buying a business, then you're going to get the highest value out there, regardless of what it is at this point in time. But you guys have been in the business for a long time. The multiples, they went from kind of low to so high that even right now, like a 10 or a 12 multiple, it's still fantastic. I mean, that's still, I think a good multiple for these kinds of businesses. So I wouldn't put too much stock in that. If the numbers line up, even at a 10 multiple or 12 multiple, and you're ready to move on, and you have enough from the sale, then pull the trigger. You know, I think owning the building certainly is a big factor in that equation too. If you can keep the building and keep that as an income source, that it's really a great anchor income stream for most of these owners.
Makes a ton of sense, Eric. Like every week, we've run out of time. We've got a couple of questions that we like to wrap up with. First is a YouTube, TED Talk, some kind of book that you found inspiring that you think you'd like to share with our audience.
Been reading this book called The Fourth Turning, and it's a book on just civilizations go through these different phases, and like every 80 or 90 years there seems to be some kind of event that changes the culture, changes the face of things. And I've found it utterly fascinating to read that and kind of mirror to see if we're in one of those turnings right now. But that's just part of my fascination. That's probably a book that I would definitely recommend to people to read.
Well, and we don't want to forget about the how to become a financial beast,
That's
which is the
true.
book of
Yes.
yours. So let's make sure that people check it out on Amazon and all where else they can find that.
Yeah, we certainly go to our website, chronologicsfinancialadvisors.com, and access it there. But I believe you can get it on Amazon for a reduced cost.
All right. How about Audible? Can they listen to it?
I haven't done that yet, but that'll be next
Okay.
on the agenda. It shouldn't take very long. It's a quick
Well,
read.
you have the setup for it, so so you can do that. And then the second question that we ask: is there an interesting doctor that you bumped into in our industry that would be a good guest on this podcast that is doing something interesting, something innovative, or a good business owner to consult and basically interview here?
I have a number of them. I'll give you one right now. He just specializes in equine. I find him utterly fascinating. He's developed additional software outside of the veterinary industry. His name is Dr. Len Donato. He's in Philadelphia. Has a really great practice, and is just has a high business acumen. And I think I'd love for people to listen to how he manages his business and his personal life.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryin.podcast.com. See you next week.